It's F80 time again. I told you guys on the last video when we brought the F80 in, we're finally gonna start modding it. Today I got the F80 in the shop. We're putting a full exhaust system on it. Downpipes, mid pipes, exhaust muffler, the whole shebang, courtesy of Stone Exhaust. Let me show you guys. So we've literally got the entire exhaust system from the downpipes all the way to the muffler from Stone Exhaust. So Stone Exhaust sent us this entire system to review and install. We're not getting paid for any of this, so it's gonna be our opinion, unbiased. One of the main things I don't like about the F80, F82, just the S55 in general, is the exhaust note. It just does not sound that good. It sounds like an air compressor, honestly. But this entire exhaust system hopefully will resolve that. The F80 and F82 come stock with a Valvetronic exhaust system, where you can just press the M button on the steering wheel and you'll open up the valves to make it louder. And Stone Exhaust retains that. They do have their optional Valvetronic system where you can use a separate remote, but I kind of wanted to stick with the OEM stuff where I can just press the steering wheel button and open the valves. So that's what we did here. We're gonna put the stock valve motors on here and it should operate as if it was coming right out of the factory. Since this is a review video, I will have a separate video on how to install these downpipes, which will be linked down below. Before I pulled the F80 into the shop, I took it for a spirited run. This wouldn't be a good review if you guys didn't know how it sounded before. So here's a short snippet. We'll see more of those clips for the before and after later on in the video once we have this entire exhaust system installed. Let's get right to it. Now, a quick tip for anybody doing this at home, especially all of you East Coast guys, soak this stuff with some PB Blaster or any kind of penetrant. And another tip, you want to actually take off as much of the corrosion and dirt and stuff on these exhaust studs as much as you can before you spray it with the penetrant so it can actually get in there. So I've got all of this stuff soaking for a couple hours and we should be good to actually pull these off. Look at all that rust just fall right off. And all of this with my little rigid. Now these two bolts, those will actually come off after we pull the rest of the exhaust off. So I've got everything laid out. What we do need to do now, because the new exhaust system does not come with any of the exhaust hangers or mounts. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to remove all of these old exhaust hangers and these mounts. So you can see there's some surface rust going on right here. I'm actually gonna remove all of these, get them painted, and then we're just gonna install them onto the new system. So one thing you wanna do, you can actually get a special tool to remove these. I'll have that link down below. I don't have it, so I'm just gonna use some lube and some screwdrivers or whatever I can, needle nose pliers to get them pulled off. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, paint the ones that I need to, and get them transferred over. So before we can start reassembly, there's a few things that we have to do. For the downpipes, we have to actually transfer over all of the O2 sensors to each downpipe. And for the rest of the exhaust, as you guys saw, I took off these mounts off of the stock exhaust. We're gonna transfer them over to the new exhaust. So I've got everything laid out exactly how it's gonna go in the car, and we can start putting the mounts on the new exhaust. You can just use some soapy water, just to use it as lube so you can slide it right in. Now the last thing before we can put the muffler and all that stuff on, we're gonna have to transfer over our valves. So we're gonna reuse all the stock valves that were on the stock exhaust. I know Stone Exhaust does make their own Valvetronic kit, which comes with their own valves, which you'd have to use a remote for. For us, we're just gonna reuse the stock one, so all the OEM functionality from the steering wheel and all that stuff will still work. So Stone Exhaust provided us with a diagram. So first thing you have is this spring right here. We're gonna drop that in over the actual valve itself. And you can use a needle nose plier to help you with that. And now we have this adapter right here. As you can see, there's a bar that goes across on one side. That's gonna be sticking up. So what you wanna do is there's a hole inside of here. You wanna line that up with the actual valve itself that's inside this opening. Now, since there's a spring in there, this is not gonna sit completely flat on that valve. And what we need to do is we need to line up the valve motor with this rod and also that valve inside of there. So everything has to line up properly, that way this valve motor can actuate the valve that's inside this exhaust. So that's where you wanna really, mess around with it, wiggle it around. You can actually move the valve that's in there. There's not really much resistance on there because all the resistance is provided by this valve motor. So we're gonna get everything lined up as best as we can. You wanna just set the whole valve motor down, look through the exhaust section right here, and twist the valve motor and see if that valve is also twisting inside the exhaust. And once you've verified that, we're gonna use their supplied bolts and nuts to secure it. And this process is exactly the same on the other side. I'm looking over these downpipes, and a few things I noticed right off the bat. This whole downpipe is actually the same size, the piping material itself, the same diameter as the rest of the exhaust. Now when you compare it to the stock BMW OEM catalytic converter downpipes, the opening is much wider where it meets the turbo. On the Stone exhaust, it just closes it up. It is a smooth transition to the smaller diameter pipe as opposed to the BMW OEM one. It's a lot wider right here, but the catalytic converter is right there. And then it gets smaller as it goes through the catalytic converter, and then the rest of the diameter of the exhaust is the same. Another thing I did notice on the entire Stone exhaust system, it seems like the piping diameter is pretty much the same as the OEM exhaust. So here are the main differences. So we've got obviously different resonators right here. And then the BMW system has a muffler slash resonator right here. The Stone exhaust system does not. And as you go further back, everything else looks pretty much the same. Even the routing, the size, everything looks pretty much the same. And then we have the muffler. So this muffler is definitely lighter than the stock one, and it is shorter. And it seems like the actual cutout itself has a pretty straight, straight through design as well, as opposed to the BMW side. Even their valved section goes a little bit through the muffler. It might still be pretty straight, but I think they're just perforated holes in that pipe that comes through the exhaust. Also, one thing I noticed on the downpipe is when it comes to the secondary O2 sensor. So we have the one that's technically pre-cat, which is this one right here. That's also known as the primary O2 sensor. This is the one that goes up to the engine bay. And then we have the secondary O2 sensor, which is also known as the post-cat O2 sensor. Now there's some kind of wire mesh kind of situation going on in this hole. And I'm pretty sure it's left there on purpose because both of the downpipes have it. And then if you actually look through the downpipe, this whole section is actually closed off inside the downpipe. And there are just like a couple of small holes in there. And I think they did that to kind of spoof the computer into thinking that, the O2 sensors it's pretty much spoofing the reading. I'm actually very curious to see if this is going to trigger a check engine light or not when we put these downpipes on, because I'm not going to do any tuning on this car until we do the whole crank hub fix and all that. So we're just going to run it on the stock tune this entire time. So I'm really curious to see when that check engine light is going to pop up. Usually another thing I usually like to do is heat wrap or exhaust wrap the whole downpipe section. I don't think that's really necessary on the F80, F82 because there's so much heat shielding around the downpipes from factory. So I don't think that should be an issue for us. But yeah, with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer these O2 sensors over to both downpipes. One thing, if you are living in a rusty area, you can get the special type of anti-seize that's made for exhaust components. Make sure you use that. For us, it's not gonna be that big of an issue. So we're just gonna go ahead and swap them over. And when you're pulling these off, you don't wanna touch the tip of this at all. You don't get any oils or anything on it. And this is just gonna be a 22 millimeter oxygen sensor wrench, or you could use an open-ended wrench like I did. So before we can install the new downpipes, I like to replace all of the gaskets. The gasket that comes on the downpipe is actually installed into the turbo. So you can see it's right around this whole edge. We can remove this V-band clamp, and you can see the whole gasket. It sits inside of this groove right here. So we're gonna pull the old one out, put the new one in, do the same thing for both turbos, and then we're ready to put the downpipes back on. So I cleaned up this whole mid plate and got it installed on here. The downpipes are still very loose, they're just in place. Once we have all of this lined up with the rest of the exhaust, then we can tighten down the V-band clamps, route all the O2 sensors properly, and even get this bracket for this downpipe secured as well. So here's a new gasket. I'll have the link down below. So this gasket has a cone shape to it on one side, and the other side is completely flat. So you want the flat side to go against this flange right here on the downpipe, and you just want to slide it in place. And for us, since we're also replacing these downpipes, I'm leaving these two bolts a little loose. That way, once we have everything else lined up properly, everything can be, exactly where it needs to be. And we can tighten both of these with an Allen key or a hex socket after everything else is back on. Keep going further down. So now we've got the clamps that they provided with this whole exhaust system, and the way these fittings work, you can see there's like a hole, there's like slats. Slit. There's a slit cut on each side of the pipe, and what's gonna happen, this is gonna slide right over the pipe, and then with this clamp, you're gonna be able to tighten it down, and it'll make a nice tight seal. So usually you wanna slide the clamp over it first, because once you have this slit on there, you're not gonna be able to get the clamp on there. So what I like to do is I like to line it up first, just to see where we're looking at, where it's gonna be, so I can put the clamp, the nut in the proper orientation, so I know exactly, how I can tighten it. And you're gonna keep pushing this in until you can't see any more, black space through here. You should only be able to see the pipe. And that's how you're gonna know once you tighten this clamp. It's gonna clamp around it, and it's gonna be a nice tight fit. And it's gonna bottom out. You can see the flare only goes to a certain point. And once again, I'm just putting everything nice and loose first, once we have the rest of the exhaust on there, because everything can be tweaked a little bit until you tighten these clamps down. So you can see right here, like I don't have the proper orientation right now, because this is sitting way too low, especially for my liking. I don't like where it's sitting at all, because it's gonna be the first section that's gonna scrape on anything. So see, we could twist it a little bit more, and we can always push this way too. Everything is adjustable, just like adjustable suspension. Now the final section we have is the muffler itself. Before the muffler goes on, this is a different type of flange. It's not held in with clamps. So Stone Exhaust provided us with these two gaskets. So we're just gonna slide these over. And this is gonna be held in with 4 bolts, 2 on each side, which is also provided with the exhaust system. So now that we have everything routed, all the O2 sensors down here, as well as all of the brackets, the V-band clamps, the front flanges, all that stuff is tight. This mount is also tight. So now what you want to do is you want to make sure you get all of these pipes routed and make sure they're not touching anywhere like on the body. You want to have at least, I would say, a couple centimeters of clearance because the exhaust is going to move around a little bit and you just don't want it to hit any of these metal shields or anywhere on the body. Otherwise you're going to hear that rattle. So we've got everything where we want it. You also want to make sure it's not hanging too low in any certain spots. That way it doesn't drag on the ground, especially if your car is lowered. So the clamps, I've just got them as close to the edge as I can, with still a little bit of the edge poking through. And even with the clamps, you want to make sure they're not touching the body because that will also cause a rattle. So the exhaust is finally on. I'm so excited to hear how it sounds, especially with those valves open. Right now we've driven it a little bit, trying to warm the car up, and with the valves closed, I can't really tell. It sounds like exactly like it did from factory. It's not louder, it's not quieter, it sounds perfect. It's exactly what you would want, you know, in the morning when you're leaving for work. You don't want to wake up your neighbors. Sounds just as you would want it to. So once it warms up, then we can really get on it, open up those valves, see how it sounds. So we're not using a mic on the camera so we can hear how it sounds inside as well. And we've got the mic on the outside to hear the outside exhaust tone. That's so loud. I think like the short-proof way to make the F80 and the S55 engine in general sound good is a single turbo conversion. That makes it sound amazing. But with the twin turbo setup, it's hard to get those exhaust pipes to be exactly the same length, and that kind of attributes to the, for lack of a better term, a farty sound. But even then, I mean, that farty sound, it sounds aggressive at high RPMs. And we don't have a tuner or anything on here, so we don't have any of the burbles or any of that enabled, which I'm glad we don't, because I'm not a fan of that. When you let go of the gas pedal at certain RPMs, it still does, you know, burble a little bit from factory. Like here, I'll do it here real quick. The F80 just in general is such a phenomenal car. Like, you could daily drive this thing and you could get on it like that. It's just, man. I love it. And that was all with the valves closed. At a certain RPM, the valves open automatically anyways. So, and you're not gonna get to that RPM when you're normally driving. You're only gonna get to it when you're spiritedly driving. And when you're doing a spirited drive, you're gonna have the valves open anyways. So either way, it sounds as it should. Now let's open the valves all the time. Let's see how it sounds. Oh, that's much louder. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Stone Exhaust sent us their entire system. Their catless downpipes and their full catback system. You can install this whole catback system on your factory downpipes. You don't have to replace your downpipes, which is a huge plus. So overall, the installation, it's like Legos. You can literally put everything together, and there's clamps to hold everything, so you can tweak it however you want. If you need to go back into the exhaust system to remove it in the future, it still comes right off. And it utilizes all of the factory mounting points, which is a huge plus because you're not modifying anything. And if you ever had to put the car back to stock, you can just take the mounts back off and put the stock exhaust right back on. Now, overall installation. So as of right now, there are no exhaust leaks on the system. We got all those clamps positioned and tightened down, and everything just went together really, really well. So this is something that you can definitely install on your own at home, whether it's the downpipes or just the catback exhaust system, or both. Now, my impressions on the exhaust. So it's definitely better than stock. My stock exhaust is the complete stock. It's not the M Performance exhaust. So I'm just comparing it to the base stock F80 exhaust system. Now, the F80 stock does have the Valvetronic system where you can open the valves and it'll make the exhaust a little bit louder, but it's not as much of a difference as it is with this exhaust system when you open the valves. And another thing I do like about the Stone exhaust system is the ability to reuse the stock valve motors. Because when we use those stock valve motors, we can still keep the functionality from the steering wheel to open and close the valves, and everything functions as if it was stock. Now, everybody wants to know, does it sound better? The F80s inherently do not sound that great. They sound, for lack of a better term, a little farty and a little bit more like an air compressor than an aggressive, mean machine. But this exhaust does definitely open it up a little bit more, and I do like that it sounds, pretty aggressive. Even at lower RPMs, it's still pretty aggressive compared to the stock with the valves open. Overall, I think it is a good exhaust system. Another thing that I do like is, if we were to change the downpipes in the future, we can still utilize this entire exhaust system. We can change the exhaust tips, we can personalize it however we want to, because everything is pretty much modular. You can take stuff off and put different stuff on. And if Stone Exhaust were to come out with different designs in the future, it's definitely future proof because you can just take off certain sections and replace them. So now the pricing and everything, it's always constantly changing with all kinds of exhaust systems depending on where you get them from. There's always specials and stuff going on. So I'll have all that stuff linked down below. And there are a few other exhausts out there for the F80, so you can do your own comparisons based on that. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I hope you guys enjoyed that driving footage. I loved driving it with the new exhaust, and I can't wait to get back out on the road with those valves open, windows down, in this amazing weather. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.